first of all, to say welcome and what an inspiring day. Has everybody found it good? Yeah, it's been amazing, hasn't it? Yeah. So I'll just run through with you what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about applied storytelling, which is a buzzword at the moment. It simply means applying storytelling to something like gardens or museums or galleries, or, you know, the climate issue. So I'm going to talk a bit about, I'll give you an example of applied storytelling. I'm then going to do a folk tale. Normally in storytelling, you have a thing called the ladder to the moon. So you start with something local and personal, or a folk tale before we move up to epic. I'll be doing a little bit of participation, as I said, the rhythms, and then we'll do a super quick version of Gilgamesh. And then after that, we'll do some breakout groups, come back together and, feedback. And then if there's time, we'll have a game at the end. Does that sound okay? Nobody's thinking, oh no, I'm going now. Great, good. Oh, I've just got some people who are waiting to come in. Great. So, yeah, I'm going to do this screen sharing thing. I'd like to share with you something that I did in lockdown. It's a piece of applied storytelling. Yeah, I've got that. There it is. I'll just play it and then I'll talk about it later.
Iris and then sow seeds in it. Today I'm going to make an Osiris seed bed. The ancient Egyptians would make a mould like this in the shape of their great god Osiris and then sow seeds in it. Why? Because they believed in magic, the magic of myth and the magic of nature. In the story of Osiris, he's torn apart by his wicked brother and resurrected by his goddess sister. The ancient Egyptians really believed that if they made an Osiris out of plants, then the same thing would happen to him as in the myth. The plants would get eaten, but the seeds would be used again, and they were sure that rituals connected to the story would bring about a great harvest. I'm going to call my seed bed Osiris Herbie, because I'm going to plant herbs inside the template I've just cut out. After all, it's herb magic, medicine, that will hopefully end COVID. Also, I can't cook without herbs. So there's the template. I've got some stones from Brighton Beach, and I'm going to fill inside the stones with healing herbs corresponding to the different parts of the body. But first, we've got the crown of Osiris. And for that I'll use basil, which is a kingly herb, and it's antioxidant and antiviral, so therefore a perfect herb for the moment. But basil's also good for depression, diabetes, snake bite and cleaning the nasal passages. The ancient Egyptians believed that Osiris's spirit blew into the body of each pharaoh. For the throat I'm using oregano. One of its health benefits is to ease coughing. So a double whammy, antiviral basil, anti-cough oregano. May this sympathetic magic make Osiris seedbed or Herbie contribute to the easing of COVID. For the chest, I'm using dill, which is anti-inflammatory and a great protector of the heart and some forms of cancer. For the stomach and for the legs, I'm using coriander, which is brilliant for masses of things: digestion, Alzheimer's, the nervous system. Now, these appendages are not arms, they're a crook and a flail. The crook is the shepherd's crook, looking after nature. The flail is what Osiris uses to thresh the barley, get the seeds out that will give rebirth to the plant. They used to say that only a woman that wore the trousers could plant parsley, and I'm hoping to dispute that rumour with the help of some water and some sunshine, but I'm under no illusions because I live in Saltdean. It's full of winds and foxes that dig up everything, and these are plug plants, so I'll be able to fill in the gaps. Once the herbs have been harvested, they'll be used in How to Be a Kitchen Goddess.
Okay, so that was something to keep me going during COVID, and I'm guessing if you're all climate change activists, you're probably quite green-fingered. I'm not. I can honestly say I've never made a seed grow ever in my life until lockdown. So to me, it was really magical. And I really thought it would just fail. In fact, I was prepared to go and buy, I'm doing it for Hastings Storytelling Festival. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And I'm doing a series of stories, applied storytelling, called Kitchen Goddess, where I cook in a green way and tell a story. So I thought, this is not going to work. I will just get the herbs from, Sainsbury's and plug them in. But it was amazing. So I'll share my screen again, and I don't know whether Osiris was beaming in there, but I'll show you what actually happened. So here he is. That was 7 weeks after I planted him, and he's still going strong. I'm still using him. So yes, let me stop the share again. And I'm just going to blitz you with ideas, basically. I hope you're okay with that, because I do think that, things like this just trigger ideas in people. So I'd like to now, I'll just show you a little bit of, so that's the How to Be a Kitchen Goddess. And this is, yes, I wanted to put this here to remind myself of why it's such an amazing thing that, for me, I did something on Osiris, because I'm a total goddess nerd and have been rather horribly feminist, really, with a chip on my shoulder, not wanting to tell a single story in the last 15 years. I've been telling stories for 25 about gods. But recently, I don't know, something's changed, and I've become really interested in the concept of the sensitive man and the sensitive god, which I feel we desperately need. And Osiris is one of those. This is something you can still listen to that was also done in lockdown, and is also a lot about herbs. It's Cassandra, and as viewed by a contemporary Apollo, who has turned into a sensitive man who's on the street, but he's a street gardener, and he's trying to make up to Cassandra for the past, and also seeing her in Greta Thunberg. So that's the idea. If you're interested, it's still on BBC Sounds in the short works section. So yes, sensitive men. I won't go on to that yet. Let's stop the share now, because I'd like to tell you a quick story from Sussex. Now, this is a book that I've just had published by Thames and Hudson, so I feel very lucky. It's on my dream subject, goddesses. As I said, I'm obsessed with them. And goddesses, one thing in the research I've realized, they are just the environment, the climate personified. So they might vary from country to country, but they're basically the same thing, and they share the same symbols. So that's goddesses. I'm going to give you a reading list with all sorts of mad ideas in it afterwards if you're interested. But we want to bring the goddesses home to wherever we are. And I know you're in the southwest, I'm in the southeast. And we have a goddess of Sussex. She's called Easker. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Ashdown Forest, but the Ashdown Forest you'd think came from two words, ash and downs, but that's not true. The Anglo-Saxon is Easkerdun, and it means hill of the people of Easker. So on the theme of sensitive men who look after the environment, let's go to a ranger in Sussex, a ranger of the Ashdown Forest, and he was depressed. I don't know, maybe he was listening to the news this morning about how ash dieback is speeding up, partly due to COVID, but he worked all day, and then at night he couldn't sleep. It was as if a woodpecker was pecking at his chest, saying, "You're lonely, you're lonely, you're lonely." Oh, he said, no time to be lonely. And when he looked up, sitting next to him was a woman in a simple brown dress with a simple grass crown. And she said, "Hello, I'm Easker, and I can see you're lonely, disconnected. Just think of the bluebell and helleborine, the purple bell heather and marsh moss so green. Think of wood sorrel and hay-scented fern, the bright golden gorse buds that make the heath burn." And she carried on singing, but he was already asleep. And the next day, when he came out into the heath, from the naming of those flowers, as if in a dream, he started to see them. And his heart lifted. But by the evening again, he was full of ideas in his head. Maybe he'd been writing notes too late. And he couldn't sleep. Again, that pecking in his heart. You're lonely, you're lonely, you're lonely. No, he said, looked up there. She was again. He said, hello, Iska, what are you doing here? She said, well, you're not really concentrating hard enough, are you, on being connected? So I want you to think of the fallow, the rowan red deer, the shearing of sheep in the spring of the year. Think of the cows and the squelching of milk and dragonfly lace upon lakes of soft silk. He was asleep again. And the next day he started looking at everything, all the wildlife of Sussex, and again having it named made him see it. And the next night, he so excited, he was waiting for her. He said, I still feel a bit depressed, but sing to me again. She said, think of the blackcap, the linnet and lark, the croak of the nightjar that creaks through the dark. Think of the siskin chit-chatter-tee, the quick yellow hammer, bread, no cheese. He was in love. The next day, he looked up and he felt connected to the sky and the earth, and he couldn't wait. He just wanted to say, please stay with me. He was in love with her. He waited and waited. The next night, she didn't come. And she didn't come, and she didn't come, and she didn't come. So he decided to go and look for her. And it was winter, and he went through all the many different types of mud. In Sussex, we have clodgy, I'm looking at them here, clodgy mud, gormy mud, glubbery mud, puggy mud, slabby, sleechy, slurry, smeary, stodgy, swanky, which is not swanky, but boggy. So he went all the way through that, and then a little fox started to nibble at his shoe. He said, you're hungry. He always had food for the animals, gave the fox something. The fox went ahead as if leading, and on the other side of the river, he saw girls with red hair, green hair, blue hair, white hair, and they were dancing. But one had simple brown hair. She was smaller than the rest, and she was dressed in a brown simple gown. And he said, Iska, it's me, the ranger. Can I come to you? She said, no, you can't come to me. Now I'm a girl, but next year, if you can wait a full year and keep your spirits up and look at the landscape, I'll be a bird, and I'll be with you forever. Okay, he said. And so the next year, the whole of the next year, he was looking at the flowers and the animals and the birds, and then he couldn't wait on the appointed day. There was the fox. He fed the fox led him, and there were pipits and redpolls, cuckoos and crossbills, finches and firecrests, and one tiny little bird close to the ground, a skylark. Hey, oh, you don't shout at birds. And as gently as mist coming up from the lake, she settled on a branch next to him. And as he put his hand up, his fingers began to feather, his feet began to claw, and he understood what she was singing. Let's swish with the chiff-chaffle, 1, 2, 1, 3. Take off with the stone chatter, chack, 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 chee. Let's loop and let's swoop and go soaring so free. And dive with the kestrel, a key, 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 key. Now, you won't see 2 skylarks now, probably, if you go to the Downs, because it's autumn. But if you go in spring and you see 2 of them circling, you'll know it's Iska and the ranger, the skylarks that watch over Sussex. So I wanted to tell you that story because I'm very inspired at the moment, as I'm sure many of you are, by Robert Macfarlane, who says that we need to rewild language, and if we lose language, we are more likely to lose landscape. So in my small learning by stealth way, I feel that's the way I can be an activist. So now I've been talking long enough. Are you ready to join in with a story? Can you unmute yourselves? Yeah, can you just give me a hi?
Hi.
Hi.
And can you shake your hands out? Shake them up and shake them down and shake them up and shake them down. Okay, I'm going to do the world's fastest version of Gilgamesh, and you're going to help me. So I need you to first of all make the sound of the water goddess, which is her name and also a chant I've recently found out, which is terribly exciting. Her name is Aruru, but if you chant it, it goes Aruru, 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 or you could go Ruru, Ruru, Ruru. We don't know how it was said, but just try the burbling of water. Here we go. Aruru, Aruru, Aruru. Oh my gosh, you actually sound like a stream. That is fantastic. Okay, now we need to work. This is a real patriarchal myth in many ways. It's the first one ever written down. And you'll see, I don't need to talk about its environment and implications. You'll get them. But I will say, you'll get them because I get them. And when I first told this story, I used to tell it like a questing warrior because it made me feel powerful. And it was years before I found my feminine voice, and now I tell it completely differently. How you tell a story, audiences are so sensitive, they're often ahead of you about what you actually feel about a story, especially children. So anyway, so we've got to work. Show me your muscles. You have to go, heave the mud.
Heave the mud.
Carve the stone.
Carve the stone.
Moan and groan.
Moan and groan.
Together it goes, heave the mud, carve the stone, moan and groan. All together now. Heave the mud, carve the stone,
moan and groan.
Moan and groan. And if you forget it, you can just go 1, 2 in ancient Arabic, which is wahed itneen, wahed itneen, wahed itneen. Here we go. Wahed
itneen, wahed itneen, wahed itneen, wahed itneen.
Just making noise and rhythm to get you working, basically. What else do I need? Oh yes, time passing. So passing. 20 leagues and then it's 400 leagues and then they ate 1,000 leagues and then they slept 400 leagues and then they ate 1,000 leagues and then they slept. They walked the new moon to the full moon to the new moon. Here we go. 400 leagues and then they ate 1,000 leagues and then they ate 1,000 leagues and then they ate new moon to the full moon, the full moon, new moon. Great. Okay. Fantastic. I've never done this before and it's going slower than I thought, even though you probably think I'm speeding like a maniac. Right, here we are. Said in my notes, don't rush. Too late for that. Okay. So I'm going to tell the story with artifacts. So Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the story we're going to be telling. And it takes place in ancient Sumeria, the city of Uruk, in between the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And it's the first recorded story, 5,000 years old it is, and it's written down on various clay tablets, lots in the British Museum, but various other places. So Gilgamesh the king was half god and half man. He got his beauty from the god of the sun, he got his strength from the god of the storm, and he got his humanity from his mother. But nobody throughout the 4 corners of the earth was as beautiful or as brave or as strong as King Gilgamesh. And that was part of the problem. He couldn't find a friend. He couldn't find an equal. All that he had was burning ambition. He used to say, by skin or by bone, I'll be written in stone. By skin or by bone, I'll be written in stone. Skin, bone, stone. Build me a wall. And every morning the drum would roll and children never saw their parents. Husbands never saw their wives, etc., because they would be working, building the wall. For these I have to have a little kind of breakout moment here. These are from the Pergamon in Berlin. And I'd been telling Gilgamesh for 25 years before I went to the Pergamon, and I nearly had a heart attack. I am not kidding. It was like most people see the artifacts and then hear the story. I heard the story and saw the artifacts, and I've never been the same since. So anyway, that's the reconstruction of a wall. The people were working, so here we go. Heave the mud, carve the stone, moan and groan. That was good. Heave the mud, carve the stone, moan and groan. And if you know it, Some of you can improvise with a wahed itnin, wahed itnin. Keep that going. Wahed, lovely. That was Laura, wasn't it? Wahed itnin, wahed itnin. Heave the mud, carve the stone. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Just joining in. Yeah. Now, Aurora. Lovely. She looked down and she said, "Oh, God, Gilgamesh, he just needs a friend." And she got mud from the riverbed and water, and she started to fashion it together. And she made a man covered from heel to head with hair, and she said, "Wild man, I name you Enkidu." That's her thinking that the two of them should be equal. And Enkidu could climb like a monkey and run like a deer and swim like a fish. He was as strong as a lion and as free as a bird. But the one thing he couldn't bear was if he saw any of his friends, the animals of the forest, in a trap. He would break the trap and release the animal. But one day he saw the hunter who was setting the traps, and he went close to the hunter and he got him by the ears and he looked at him like this, which I'm sure is pretty scary. And the hunter, in complete terror, went running back to Gilgamesh and he said, "Gilgamesh, in the forest there is a man as tall as you, as brave as you, and scarier than you." And Gilgamesh said, "I think you must be mistaken. Bring him to me." Well, the hunter had no intention of going back to the wild man, so instead he went into the inner world of Uruk. And so he went past the fantastic things that you see in the Pergamon Museum. But he was heading straight for the temple of Ishtar, through the Ishtar gate. And he was making for a particularly talented priestess who could play music to such an extent she could charm animals. And he said, "Listen, I need your help." And so she listened to his story and she agreed to go with him and see if she could tame the wild man. In fact, she was so excited about it, she tingled and flushed and blushed. And yes, this isn't the adult version. She saw Enkidu by the watering hole, but he had already smelt her. And when she started to play, he came and he put his wild head in her lap and listened. And he was very intelligent. He was made by Aruru. And so he soon learnt the language of human beings. And he listened to the story of King Gilgamesh. And he fell in love. And it was as if a new head was raising itself in his chest. And he said, "Take me to Gilgamesh." So she wrapped him in oils and a mantle and gave him wine to drink, and then they went to meet Gilgamesh. But the first thing that Enkidu heard was the sound of the people working, and it sounded to him like suffering, like the sound of animals in a trap. So we can do it, yeah, a bit sotto voce here. Let's go for less volume and more specificity. So wahed itnin, wahed itnin. And if you want to go ahead of it, it's heave the mud, carve the stone. Heave the mud, carve the stone. And he shouted to Gilgamesh, who he saw standing in front of the stone lines, "Either stop the suffering or fight." And the people, nobody spoke to Gilgamesh like that. And they looked at the wild man and they said to themselves, "You know, the wild man is as strong as a lion. Gilgamesh is as strong as a bull. The wild man is as strong as a mountain, but Gilgamesh is as tall as a tower. I wonder who's going to win." The two men started to fight, ripping, tearing, clawing, mauling, locking heads and arms like stags lock antlers. And they battled in the streets and the houses juddered. They battled at the gates and the stone lines shook. They battled at the pavements and everything juddered. They battled and they battled, and then the people said, "Look," because Gilgamesh had leapt to the very top of his wall. He was obviously some kind of Superman, and Enkidu had leapt with him, and they were carrying on fighting, but they were so equal in strength. The people realized this battle could go on for a very long time and might destroy civilization completely. So they called for Ururu in the way you do. And she looked down and she laughed. She said, "Yes, this could go on a very long time." And so she blew a brick from underneath Enkidu's foot, and he started to fall. But as he started to fall, Gilgamesh's dream was broken. That night he had dreamt that a star had fallen, and he'd run to the stone, and it changed into a little baby, and he held the baby and fell in love with the baby. And then the baby turned into a brother, a man, and he fell in love with the man, and he realized the man was Enkidu. And so he pulled him to safety. And when the two men looked at each other, the stars shone in their eyes, and Gilgamesh said, "Friend." And from then on, Enkidu and Gilgamesh did everything together. But the forests weren't deep enough, the rivers weren't wide enough, and the mountains weren't high enough for the two heroes. And so one day Gilgamesh said, "You know, we are written in dust. I want to live forever, by skin or by bone. I want to be written in stone. So let's go to the sacred forest, cut down the trees, and build palaces for our gods, palaces for our people, and temples for our gods." And Enkidu said no, because in the forest is Humbaba. His breath is death, his voice is fire, his shout is flood. He is the protector of the forest. And Gilgamesh said, "Are you my friend or not?" And it was a long time before Enkidu answered, "Yes." But first they went to see Gilgamesh's mother, as you do. And when she heard what they were going to do, she knew there was nothing she could say. So she bathed herself in soapwort and tamarisk, and she went to the top of the roof, and she spoke to the gods. She said, "God of the sun, you gave my boy beauty. God of the storm, you gave him strength. But from my entrails, I regret his restless heart. He's going to the sacred forest. Protect him." Ah, there's Humbaba. I think I'm just going to have a little diversion about Humbaba here. This is what we've got here. This is the oracle face of Humbaba. But Humbaba was the spirit of the forest. He was beautiful. It was said that he had 7 radiances. And these radiances were the radiance of the fields and the rivers and the forests and the mountains and the lions, anything else you can think of in nature, and also the goddess of the underworld. And but I always think of the radiances because he was like a rainbow, like the chakras. So it could be the red of the sun and the green of the fields, and except the blue of the rivers, etc., etc. But here we just have his oracle head. More of that later. So Gilgamesh and Enkidu prepared themselves. They strapped on their swords, they took their axes, and they went out into the wild places, knowing that Gilgamesh's mother had blessed them, so they had the strength of the sun and the god of the storms with them. And then 400 leagues, and then they ate 1,000 leagues, and then they slept. I can't see you, so I can't, I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a sec so I can look at you. Hello, are you there?
Yes.
Are you still with me?
Yes.
Yes, well, come on then, we're going to go walking. Let me see you walking. Got to get yourself immersed, applied into this story. 400 leagues, and then they ate 1,000
leagues, and then
100 leagues, and then they ate 1,000 leagues. And they walked the new moon to the full moon, the full moon to the new moon, and every night they dug a well, and every night Enkidu made a circle around Gilgamesh, and he sat with his knees to his chest, and every night he had a terrible dream that mountains were falling with a crash, and lightning was burning earth to ash, and a bull was kicking dust up into the heavens. But Enkidu said, don't worry, it just means the powers of the gods are with us, and we're going to defeat Humbaba. They came, let's go back to the images. They came to the sacred forest. Yeah, no, it's not clicking on. I don't know why. What have I done? There it is. They came to the sacred forest, and Gilgamesh took his axe. "Go on, do it," said Enkidu, and he struck the biggest, oldest tree. And as he struck that tree, Humbaba awoke as if the axe was cutting his own skin. And as he began to make his way towards whoever had cut his tree, all the little animals began to warn Enkidu, their old friend. Humbaba, here we go. Humbaba, 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 Humbaba. And Gilgamesh was absolutely terrified when he saw the radiance of the great forest god. Humbaba, Humbaba. So overwhelmed, he fell into a deep sleep. Enkidu tried to wake him up. Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh, wake up. Hum, baba, hum, baba. Closer and closer he came. Hum, baba, hum, baba. Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh woke up just in time to take his axe and face Humbaba, who said, my breath is death, my shout is fire, my voice is flood. I'll pound your flesh and paste your blood. I'll fling your guts to reeking crows. I'll tread your teeth beneath the stones. Your flesh will slowly decompose, forgotten in this forest. And Gilgamesh nearly melted, and then he remembered the blessing of his mother, and he called for the winds, the blistering wind, the biting wind, the winds of gale, tempest, and sandstorm, and they pushed Humbaba back. This is fascinating. And I'll talk about that later. That's the oracle head. Anyway, we're not there yet. So the gods of the storms helping Gilgamesh. He's pushed back, and now Humbaba starts to plead with. He said, listen, I am the protector of the forest. If you don't kill me, and I will tell you which trees are good to cut so the forest can reforest itself. I will carry the wood for you. I will do anything. Don't kill me. And Gilgamesh put his axe down, but now Enkidu was trembling in terror, and he said, no, you've got to kill, because when an animal is released from a trap, if it's wounded, it will kill. And so Gilgamesh took his axe and he struck off the head of Humbaba. A gentle rain fell on the forest. A gentle rain fell on the forest. And then they hacked and cut and hewed, and they made a raft out of reeds, and they carried the wood down, and they put the head of Humbaba with its bloodshot eyes, and they built palaces for their kings and their people, and temples for their gods, houses for their people. But the gods got together and they said, Humbaba was the protector of the forest. At the very least, if a god has died, one of the heroes must die. But should it be Enkidu? Should it be Gilgamesh? Should it be Gilgamesh? Should it be Enkidu? They decided that as Enkidu had not listened to the pleas of Humbaba, and as Enkidu was a wild man of the forest and should have known better, Enkidu should die. And within 7 days, he was dead. And Gilgamesh went crazy. He said, we went everywhere together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, heart to heart. You were the dagger at my side. You were the belt of gold around me. I can't live without you. And then he started to empty all his coffers out to the gods, all his sheep pens, all his jewels. And then he started to cry violently. As if he cried violently, they'd bring Enkidu back to life. But of course they didn't. And then he started to think, we were like brothers. We were so similar. My best friend is clay, I soon will be dust. And then he screeched. This is a lovely, lovely artifact. They didn't know about this. This is actually thought, they didn't know what was in this kind of griffin creature's bag. I've used him because he's a little bit like Gilgamesh, kind of rewilding himself. But this is pollen. They're collecting pollen in those bags. The priest used to collect pollen. How far out is that? And he said that he couldn't live without Enkidu, but he couldn't also live with the idea that he was going to die and he was going to fight death. And by the time he went to fight death, he looked like the wild man. He dressed himself in wild animal skins. And off he went. And he came, to the Twin Peaks, interestingly named, the Twin Peaks at the edge of the world. And at the top of the Twin Peaks, there was a scorpion man and a scorpion woman. And you can do this if you like. So you show your scorpion pincers and you go, here we go. How are you? Very nice. Hollow with sorrow, man, skin and bone, all alone, man. And he said, I'm Gilgamesh and I've come to fight death. Gilgamesh, don't think of tomorrow. Wherever you go, death will follow. Enjoy the child that puts their hand in yours. Dress yourself in bright robes. But Gilgamesh said, no. My best friend is clay. I soon will be dust. I want to fight death. Show me the way to Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim is basically the Sumerian earlier version of Noah who'd survived the flood. And the scorpion man told him to go through the tunnel of the sun. The sun would be there in 12 hours' time to rise in the east. And if he could run through the tunnel of the sun, then he stood a chance of meeting Utnapishtim, the only one who defeated death. So can you start running, please? We'll do it in so much slow motion. because it's really hard. Darkness above, darkness below, darkness to the left, darkness to the right, no light. And he got to the end of the tunnel just in time. The sun came blazing through, and as it did, he saw a river in front of him. And he made a raft. And this isn't thinking about Enkidu. This is his heart as a desert. And he got on the raft, and in the distance he saw two eyes looking at him like this, the eyes of Utnapishtim. And Utnapishtim said, "Who are you, hollow with sorrow man, skin and bone, all alone man?" And Gilgamesh said, "My best friend is clay. I don't want to be dust. I've come to fight death." And Utnapishtim just said, "All right, do without sleep for 7 days and 7 nights, and you'll have done without death." And Gilgamesh said, "I can do that, I can do that, I can do that." He hadn't really slept since Enkidu had died, and it wasn't long before he was in a deep sleep. Now, Utnapishtim, fantastically, had a wife. And she said, "You know, he's never going to believe us. Oh, he's going to deny the fact that he's been asleep. So I'm going to cook a loaf for every day that he sleeps, and I'm going to put it underneath his cheek. And when I cook the loaf, his imprint will be in the dough, so he won't be able to dispute the fact that he's been asleep for 7 days, because that was how long Gilgamesh slept for. And when he woke up, he said, "I was not asleep, I was not asleep." And she showed him all the loaves lined up, and the first one was hard from 7 days ago, the second one like leather, the third soggy, fourth moldy, fifth okay, sixth fresh, the seventh actually still in the flames. And Gilgamesh got it. And he wept. And they felt so sorry for him. Nobody had got this far. Nobody had had such fire inside them that they took him. And this is a modern artist's view. And I meant to look to see who it was, but if you look up Google images, it probably tells you. He went down and he got a spiny plant there. And they said that if he ate the spiny plant, he would be like a snake, a real goddess symbol. He would shed a skin and be born again. They said, "That's all right then." And so off he went. Until he came just outside of Uruk, and he decided to bathe because he was very dusty. While he was bathing, the snake ate the herb and shed a skin. Actually, it was for the first time in history, so that's where, well, recorded history, certainly not in goddess history, but there he is. He realized that he was going to die. He got back to Uruk, but he heard a sound that he couldn't believe, the sound of the people working, heave the mud, carve the stone, moan and groan. And as he entered the gates of Uruk, they erected a statue of Enkidu in obsidian and lapis lazuli, decorated with thousands of jewels. And for 1 second, the likeness was so good that Gilgamesh thought that his best friend, his heart companion, was standing in front of him. And then he realized the power of art. And he got an idea of how to keep Enkidu alive. He picked up some clay, he took a stick, and he started to press the stick into the clay, and he wrote the story that I've just told you. And we talked about the tablets before. What he dreamt about really came true, but not in the way he expected, not with walls and conquering palaces, but by skin or by bone, I'll be written in stone. By skin or by bone, I'll be written in stone. So I just want to end. I did talk a little bit about a change in the way I've been telling stories. I used to tell stories a lot for money, a lot to sound good. And then lots of little things have happened along the way, and big things as well. This was a head of Humbaba we used to use in the British Museum, made by an art teacher, but to the original specifications. So what they used to do was, if they wanted to find out the answer to a question, they would split open a sheep, and the way the intestines fell, they could read the future. So after the performance, I decided I needed to clean out, and I decided to take the head of Humbaba to the dump. And because I thought some kids might like that, I was a bit sad. These are other props. That's the jester from the Arabian Nights and the donkey from Midsummer Night's Dream. I thought I'd keep him company in case anybody wanted that head. But just as I was leaving, there was a knock on the window, and a man came up to me and he said, "What is that?" Pointing at Humbaba. I said, "That's really interesting. You know, he's an oracle." He said, "I know what he is. We have the same thing in Africa, where I come from, and I am not touching it. If you want to get rid of that head, you put it in the skip. and I couldn't, and it's still in my loft, and I keep him there, and I often think that he's probably kind of feminine. Oops, did not get to that. The ancient Neolithic feminine had held the male inside her, and it would be the sensitive male ready to sacrifice themselves for the land. So I think really Humbaba is genderless, or both male and female. So there we are. I've had my rant, and before you now see what we're going to do, I'm going to come back to, oh, I can't get this. Yeah, stop sharing. And I realise I'm really sorry I blasted things at you. I've been very excited about being part of this conference, and I need to stop now. And I'd like you to go into breakout groups and just, I think it's probably about 20. So we'll get into 5, 10, 15, 5, perhaps 4 groups of 5. And I'd like you to introduce yourself to each other. So take a minute to do that. And then just say, out of the whole day, and we've had such inspiring talks, what really leapt out at you? And are you inspired in any way to take any of the ideas into your organisation? So it might not be that you want to use storytelling, but you want to do something. And after each one of you have said what it is that you're inspired by and introduced yourself, I'd like you to come up with a project. It could be something real, that somebody's got a great idea in their museum or wherever you work. It could be real, or it could be just a great idea. You know, like you might want to sort of cover over all the goddesses and then tell a story about an environmental heroine in front of it to explain to your audience why you're doing it. Something like that, something big. Don't worry about the logistics, and then we'll come back and present. So I'm now going to try and do breakout rooms. I notice how everybody runs away when the breakout groups come. Okay, so shall we have group 1 to feedback, please? Who's going to feedback for group 1? You just need to unmute yourself.
I'm not sure we know which group we were in.
Oh, neither do I. Your group then, Caroline.
Well, we kind of had a bit of a discussion around how visuals are really important for representing sort of information and data that make it a bit more impactful. You know, when you're talking about the amount of carbon emissions, who care, you know, a total amount of tons kind of is a bit meaningless, but actually if you can equate that to something that people would understand, like the miles traveled or something, then there's a lot more impact. So we're having a bit of a discussion around that, and then we were thinking about the project and thinking about how we could represent objects and how they've developed over the years. And I just said that I'm from the Anesthesia Museum, and one of the things that anaesthetists have managed to do is get rid of this wasteful piece, like it's a harness clip that goes around a face mask, and that people are now using those imaginatively. So for instance, they're putting them in, using them as stands for food in microwaves and things, just because why not? So there's kind of something about reusable, how objects were used and how they potentially could be used now. And then we've got crazy things like vaporizers used for fluorinated gases, which are really bad, and they've been made into lamps. So yeah, and then it kind of ties in reusable, the environment.
I think that's great, and there's so much storytelling you get out of that as well. It's a bit like, this is the house that Jack built, you know, these are the things that and showing how something moves along cumulatively. You have a cumulative story of an object. So that would be your project, to show the cumulative life of an object, and then to chart its history, and maybe using it for environmental purpose, transforming it as well. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to give you a little reaction clap there and a thumbs up. Brilliant. So that was your group. Let's have another group. Okay, Iona?
Yeah, I think we were in group 3. Hi. I think Helen was going to feed back for us because she had a great idea for a project.
It was in connection with a heritage organisation that uses a fossil fuel to like in a preserving heritage way. And just the idea of connecting up other heritage organisations that have that same difficulty, where the thing they're preserving at the time it was invented was a really great idea and a great technology, but now that technology is problematic. And so that was when the carbon, I've forgotten the word suddenly, I wrote it down, carbon literacy, inspired me to think that making those connections would be really good in the southwest and the southeast probably, to share resources and work out how we can offset what we do instead if we can't stop it altogether straight away. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very well. It wasn't an amazing idea at all. It wasn't our big group idea. That was just the big takeaway for me.
No, that sounds great. I think I got a little bit distracted by your bedroom and your lovely face, and I haven't really followed that at all, but I'm sure your group did. Yeah, that's ADHD for you. But the main thing is, I suppose, to be talking and coming up with ideas, and it doesn't happen unless you're all together. Oh my God, I can only tell stories. Right, Laurie, you're laughing away, so I'm going to pick on you. Were you in the same group?
Yeah, sorry, Xanthe, we were in the same group.
I was in a different group, and Janine was going to feed back for us.
Right.
Hiya. So our group consisted of a medieval barn, a cemetery, and MDO sort of museum areas. So we were trying to think of something that would work with all three of those, and we thought getting people, or particularly children, to tell a story from the point of view of kind of an object or a thing. And in the case of the medieval barn, it's made of oak, so it sort of starts as a tree, how it changes. A cemetery is often a place that ends up being rewilded as it gets more neglected. So the kind of viewpoint of those, and then it could be an object that's seen, had a life, and then it's been in a museum and it's got very different life, and how they see the past, and then actually maybe how they could see the future. And you could bring climate change into that, is reuse, rewilding, that kind of thing, but also concerns about how things could be affected in the future. A medieval barn might be affected by, storm damage. A cemetery could be affected by climate change in terms of ash dieback, that kind of thing. So it wasn't a big, massive idea, but it was sort of trying to bring our heads together, as it were.
No, it sounds great. It also sounds, you've got a simple structure there. And I think, going back again to that cumulative story, there is a really nice book called This is the Pot That Juan Made. And it's about South American form of pottery that Juan, this man Juan, found a fragment of an ancient civilization's pot, and he's recreated it, and now and he's used that pot to really revitalize the village's economy, because the railway stopped functioning. Usually people were working in that village were working in the railway, and that had gone defunct. So it's a real success story. I don't know if it's still in print, but it's a great one. I've used it countless times, this idea, I've even used it for my grandmother's hat. This is the hat that Mabs made. These are the needles number 9, the in and round and up and down, knitted the hat that Mabs made. This is, the cat who's in, and it just you go on breaking things down like that. And story, rhythm and image can really be helpful to get a point across really quickly, which you did there really well. And also you're personifying it, aren't you? You're unpacking it like the qualities of human being, which is what storytelling is all about. Unpacking the humanity of the landscape, giving it a name, looking after the names. What was it? Robert Macfarlane says that we've got broadband in the children's dictionary, but there's no space for bluebell. So it's keeping the old language. Oh my goodness, we are over time. That's such a shame, because I wanted to do a quick game with you. But thank you for the inspiration. And
Xanthe, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Laura.
I just wanted to point out, because I don't know if people have seen you before, and I just wanted to say that my key takeaway from your workshop was about your rhythm and using your body to bring the story alive. We talked briefly about how what we really remembered was the peck, peck, peck. of the woodpecker in your Gilgamesh story, and I think it's because, you know, you used your chest when you spoke, so that really, and also all of us as climate activists and thinking about how we can bring in climate into our daily lives and our work, it is that pecking that we all feel and wanting to know what we can do about that. So I think, yeah, I two things really, just thank you, and also that yeah, the rhythms of the storytelling and the speed and the pace, those are things that I really hold when I'm telling stories from listening to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and you've made me realise I've not really said the whole thing I was trying to do today, which is to personify the landscape and make us fall in love with it. And you're all climate activists, you are in love with the landscape, and no matter what you say, you will be read. What story you tell, you know, and what do they say? It doesn't matter, actually. People aren't really listening to the content of what you're saying half the time. They're just reading you and your passion. And put that with images and pictures and a narrative, and you've got a winning formula. But unless the heart is involved, our landscapes don't stand a chance. And personifying the landscape through gods, goddesses, factual history stories, animating an inanimate object. It's not just for children, is it? It's for all of us. So thank you. I'm going, as I say, I've got a list of links and things, but it's been a real pleasure to meet you, and I wish it had been in person, but this was a good second best.